here at my accommodation in Berat, the Hostel Maya. I won't show you so much of my room, it's a little disheveled at the moment, but step out onto my private balcony and you can appreciate why I especially like this place. In addition to being a great place to stay, the view here is splendid.
Berat is a designated World Heritage Site, not only for its Ottoman-era houses clinging to the hillsides, but for the architectural influences of civilizations coexisting here for centuries, including at its hilltop castle, where people still live today. And all of it surrounded by extraordinary scenic beauty.
I'm walking in a neighborhood that's just down the way from the hostel where I'm staying, and you may be able to hear the gobbles of turkeys in the background. The church you see behind me was completed in 1864. It's the Church of St. Spiridon, almost dead center in Gorica, the so-called Christian section of Berat. This church is significant in that when the communist era began, its leader in Hoxha not only closed this church, but desecrated it inside and turned it into a mundane use. One of the first things that happened in this town, at least in the Christian quarter, after the fall of the communist regime, was that this church was reopened with great celebration, and many people, far more than could be held inside, assembled here on that occasion. And ever since, it has become something no longer a symbol of communist suppression under Hoxha, but of revival. It would be very easy to get lost in the maze of stone streets, walkways I should say, in Berat. I have the advantage of having been with a guide yesterday when it was not practical to do a lot of shooting. But nonetheless, I learned a number of things about the streets here. The walkways were built of two types of stones. To simplify it, one is a very light color, as you can see, and the others are dark colored stone. And the light ones are very slippery, whether or not there's rainfall. The dark ones, not so much. And so the purpose was to thwart would-be invaders, incursions into the town, either by foot or horseback, because they couldn't really navigate around the slippery stones. And yet the locals would, of course, know where to step. Pretty ingenious. Berat is popularly known as the city of 1,000 windows, owing to the architectural design of the Ottoman homes on the hillsides here. But interestingly, that nickname is a mistake. It's actually a mistranslation from the Albanian slogan, which is really city of windows on windows. But I guess the Albanian slogan was not quite catchy enough for the English-speaking world, at least. The building you see behind me was at one time Berat's movie theater. During the communist era, it served as a movie theater, the latter part of the era. Only state-approved films were shown there of Albanian origin, almost exclusively. I can imagine there were no Academy Award nominees among them. But when the regime finally ended, people here literally ransacked the place as an act of both defiance and jubilation. And this building sits empty. It is relatively modern, but it's sort of marked as an ugly symbol of the Enver Hoxha regime, and it remains unused. I'm literally across the street from a very nice supermarket, one in which you can find, well, anything you would expect to find in a supermarket except one thing, and that is fresh produce. Here in Berat, as in much of Albania, produce is sold by produce sellers. It's a kind of farm to table concept. And so this particular street is lined with produce sellers. Despite this supermarket being across the street. I'm standing on a watchtower on one corner of the Castle Hill, and there are very few places that offer a more majestic view of the town, the river, and the mountain range behind me. That is, when it's not socked in. As you can imagine, Berat's long and colorful history is inextricably linked to this fortress, the original walled city. It was fought over and occupied by a variety of peoples in succession, and is still occupied today. The homes that we see here today are, of course, of the late Ottoman period. It was in about the 1600s that people began to move out of the walled city and build on the sides of the hills, and most of the housing stock that has been built here dates from the 1800s. Ottoman houses inside the fortress. There are businesses here, some restaurants, Not many, and mostly serving tourists, but still, it's a community. And as one longtime resident of Berat told me, if you haven't gone to the castle, you haven't seen Berat.
My meal inside the castle was, as they say, fit for a king.
Berat has been inhabited since at least the 6th century BC. The Greeks and the Romans claimed it in ancient times, and after the breakup of the Western Roman Empire, it was a rather vulnerable outpost on the Byzantine Empire's frontier. And like much of the Balkans, it was also susceptible to attack over the centuries from Slavs. And of course, the Ottomans later on claimed the place, as they did much of Albania, until the early 20th century, when the Albanian independence movement took root. So you get a feeling for just the different levels or layers of history here that exist side by side, and in archaeological terms exist beneath each other. Just walked into a little scene of village life where the cafe owner is tending to his daughter. It's quaint, to say the least. A castle still inhabited, a village of sorts, occupying it. It's a different feeling. It's a real living piece of history. I'm inside the ruins of the White Mosque, built by the Ottomans in the 16th century. When I turn the camera around, what you see is an Orthodox Christian church, the Church of the Holy Trinity, that dates from the 14th century. Side by side, built centuries apart by persons of different religious traditions. A frequent story in Albania.
Okay.
Are you catching fish?
No, English. No.
It's good.
As I prepare to go to dinner with fellow guests at the hostel, to a very special family restaurant, by the way, the sounds on the balcony, which were of church bells in the morning, are now of Islamic calls to prayer. The restaurant, which requires reservations, was as advertised.
Name is Pav Kosi. Ingredients: yogurt, egg, rice, little bit rice, and the lamb meat. Lamb meat. Name this is vergessen. From Germany, nicht vergessen. Here is called vergessen in Germany. Ingredient: ricotta. You know ricotta, the soft cheese.
Yeah.
Ricotta, egg, tomato, just the liquid of tomato, different herbs, oregano, pepper, and little garlic inside. Little garlic, eggplant, aubergine, with tomato chop, onion chop, a little garlic again, just for a little garlic up in the eggplant. Tomato salad, green salad, you know, is a classic. Berati beef. Now, the salad is possible to make a little mix. Little green, little tomato, the salad. Berati beef. Now, name is beef, but this is pork with cheese inside. The name is beef, okay? Chofte. Anybody know chofte? Meatballs. Bravo, meatballs is a veal meat. Veal meat. My face you take.
That's such a beautiful mask.
I have beautiful teeth.
You do. You do.
Now, the wine, my daughter is studying university first year for dentist, my daughter.
Oh, that's my
Now, for the moment, the wine is okay here. It's coming the food, it's not stone, okay?
Yes.
Cheers.
Being like assistant, applying for a job every again. Kasua.
I'm Sophie.
I'm Dan.
Estrid.
Mira. From Germany.
The Netherlands.
Denmark.
Belgium.
I calculated my fingers. For the Tetris, I am perfect. Will come. This spoon is for the shell. One extra spoon. I think it's everything.
I know this is the eggplant,
Yes.
and we have the mixed salad.
I know the Berat.
The Berat is there, and what's third there?
Something that sounds like frigasse.
That's ricotta. That's a ricotta.
Yeah.
Tomato.
Yeah.
Tomato with rice.
I still haven't heard a name for this dish.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we don't know. Okay.
Yeah, you don't know either.
Yes, sorry.
I think the Rocky is coming out now.
Oh, Mira, before the raki.
Yes. Thank you.
To clean the palate.
The palate is cleaned.
Both.
Applying to all of these places and nobody was ready. So in the end, I just went to like this where people are searching for workers. Yeah, and that's where I got this job in the prison. So I thought like, okay, in the kitchen. Yeah.
What?
Wow.
Okay.
But it was